A dying puppy crawls to a veterinary clinic begging for help. And what the vet did next, no one saw coming. On a stormy night, a broken, bleeding dog collapses at the doorstep of a woman who's already lost everything. She didn't want to feel again, but something in his eyes wouldn't let her walk away. But this was no ordinary stray. His body hides a brutal secret, and someone dangerous will do anything to keep it buried. What happens when saving one life uncovers a truth that could destroy hers? Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The rain fell in angry sheets, turning the small town streets into rushing rivers. Lightning flashed, illuminating a lone figure struggling through the downpour. It wasn't a person, but a dog, a German shepherd, once powerful and proud, now barely able to stand. Each step was agony. The dog's matted fur hung heavy with rain and blood. Ribs showed clearly through his skin. One eye was swollen shut, and deep cuts marked his once handsome face. Still, he pressed on, drawn by instinct toward the only light still burning in the darkness. A small building with a faded sign. Morgan Veterinary Clinic. The German shepherd's legs trembled with each painful step. His breath came in ragged gasps. But something inside him, some final spark of hope, pushed him forward. Just a little further, just a little more. Inside the clinic, Dr. Rachel Morgan sat alone at her desk. Papers were spread before her, but her eyes weren't really seeing them. The office was quiet, except for the drumming of rain on the roof and the occasional rumble of thunder that matched her mood. Her phone buzzed again, the 5th time tonight. Rachel glanced at the screen, then turned it face down. Her husband again. Ex-husband soon, if the papers went through. She didn't need to hear his voice to know what he'd say. The voicemail notification blinked. Rachel sighed and pressed play, setting it on speaker. "Rachel, it's me. We need to talk about selling the house. Call me back. The realtor says—" She hit delete before he could finish. The empty clinic echoed with silence again. Once, this place had been bustling with life and purpose. Now it stood as empty as she felt inside. Rachel rubbed her eyes, feeling the weight of memories she couldn't outrun. A sound cut through the storm's fury, so faint she almost missed it. A whimper, weak and desperate, coming from outside. Rachel frowned, rising from her chair. Another sound, a soft thud against the door. She hesitated, then moved toward the entrance, peering through the rain-streaked glass. There, collapsed in a heap on her doorstep, lay a broken dog, barely breathing. "Oh my God!" Rachel whispered, her professional detachment cracking. For a moment she stood frozen. It had been months since she'd felt anything beyond the numbness. But something about the dog's desperate journey to her door broke through her walls. Without thinking further, Rachel pushed open the door and rushed into the rain. The dog was massive, despite his emaciated state, his body hot with fever. Blood mixed with rainwater beneath him. "Hey there," she said softly, her doctor's instincts taking over. "Let's get you inside." Morning light crept through the blinds of the clinic, painting soft golden stripes across the operating table where Chi-Chi lay. The German shepherd's massive body rose and fell with shallow breaths, sedated but still occasionally twitching with pain. His matted fur had been partially shaved, revealing a map of scars, both old and new. Dr. Rachel Morgan worked methodically, her skilled hands cleaning each wound with careful precision. Her face remained neutral, professional, but her eyes betrayed something deeper as she cataloged the dog's injuries. "Multiple lacerations consistent with knife wounds," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. "Broken ribs, at least 3. Old fractures that never healed properly." Her fingers traced a particularly nasty scar across his muzzle. Someone did this deliberately. Over time. The door to the operating room swung open quietly. Nina Patel, Rachel's young assistant, stepped in, her dark eyes widening at the sight of the battered animal. "Oh, the poor thing," Nina whispered, quickly moving to Rachel's side. "Is he going to make it?" Rachel nodded curtly. "His vitals are stabilizing. He's strong despite everything." She handed Nina a tray of bloody gauze. "Can you prepare another antibiotic injection? And we'll need to start him on fluids." Nina worked quickly, her movements gentle but efficient. "I heard you were here all night, Doctor. Morgan." Rachel didn't respond, instead running her hand carefully along Chi-Chi's neck. Her fingers paused. "There's something here." She reached for a scanner, passing it over the spot. A faint beep confirmed her suspicion. "He's chipped." Nina brightened. "That's good news, right? We can find his owners." Rachel's expression darkened as she studied the readout. The data's been erased, completely wiped. She looked up at Nina, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine concern. "Someone went to a lot of trouble to make this dog disappear." The front bell chimed, announcing a visitor. Nina peered through the window. "It's Officer Grant. He's here about those abandoned kittens from last week." Rachel's attention remained on Chi-Chi as the dog whimpered in his sleep, his legs twitching as if running from something. "Ask him to come back here. I need his help with something else." Minutes later, Eli Grant filled the doorway of the operating room, his police animal control uniform slightly rumpled, kind eyes taking in the scene. "Morning, Doc. Nina said you wanted to see me?" Rachel gestured to Chi-Chi. "Found him collapsed outside the clinic last night. Someone's erased his identification chip. I've never seen that before." Eli frowned, stepping closer. "That's unusual. Takes special equipment to do that." "Can you look into it?" Rachel asked, her voice more engaged than it had been in months. This wasn't just neglect. Someone did this to him deliberately. As Rachel checked Chi-Chi's vitals again, the dog whimpered, his body tensing despite the sedation. Without thinking, she placed a gentle hand on his head, her touch soothing. "It's okay," she whispered. "You're safe now." Nina and Eli exchanged a surprised glance. "I haven't seen you this focused in months," Nina said softly. Rachel stiffened, her walls visibly rebuilding. "It's just a case," she said, but her hand remained on Chi-Chi's head, and there was a flicker of something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a tiny spark rekindling in the darkness. Rachel slipped into her small office and closed the door behind her. The sudden silence was a relief after hours of monitoring machines and Chi-Chi's labored breathing. She sank into her chair, rolling her shoulders to release the tension that had built there. Her eyes fell on the framed photograph on her desk, the one she couldn't bring herself to put away, despite how it made her chest tighten every time she looked at it. Daniel, her beautiful boy, just 7 years old in the photo, his front tooth missing and his smile wide as he hugged their old golden retriever, Buddy. They looked so happy, so alive. Rachel's fingers trembled as she reached out, almost touching the glass before pulling back. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the empty room. The familiar wave of grief rose within her, that crushing weight that made it hard to breathe. 3 years since the accident, and still the pain felt fresh. She should have been there, should have known, should have saved him. Rachel shook her head firmly, pushing the emotions back down where she kept them locked away. Work. Focus on work. She had a patient who needed her. A knock at her door pulled her attention away from the photograph. "Come in," she called, straightening her posture. Officer Eli Grant stepped inside, his expression grim. "Got some news about your dog, Doc. Not good." Rachel folded her hands on the desk. "What did you find?" "Nothing. That's the problem. Eli leaned against the doorframe. The chip was professionally wiped. No amateur could do that kind of job. He hesitated. I've seen this before. In dogs rescued from fighting rings. They steal pets, erase their identities, train them to fight, or use them as bait. Rachel felt her stomach turn. Fighting rings? Here? Not officially, but there have been whispers. Eli's eyes were serious. The injuries on your patient match what we've seen in fighting dogs. Someone went to a lot of trouble to make sure that animal couldn't be traced. Rachel's jaw tightened. Thank you for looking into it. After Eli left, Rachel returned to the recovery area where Chi-Chi lay. The German shepherd's eyes fluttered open as she approached, the first time he'd shown consciousness since collapsing at her door. With a whimper, Chi-Chi tried to stand, his legs shaking violently before giving out. Rachel rushed forward, gently placing her hands on his side to steady him. Easy, she murmured, surprising herself with the softness in her voice. You're safe now. The dog's brown eyes locked with hers, filled with fear and pain, but something else too. A flicker of trust that caught Rachel off guard. Without thinking, she stroked his head, her touch gentle. I won't let anyone hurt you again, she whispered, the promise slipping out before she could stop it. The words hung in the air between them, the first real connection she'd allowed herself to feel in years. The memory came to Rachel like a sudden ray of sunshine breaking through clouds. A perfect autumn day at Westside Park 3 years ago. The trees were ablaze with red and gold, and Daniel, just 7 years old, was running across the grass, his laughter floating on the breeze. Mom, watch this, he called, throwing a blue frisbee that sailed through the air. Milo, their gentle golden retriever, bounded after it, his tail wagging wildly. The dog caught the frisbee mid-jump and trotted back proudly to Daniel. Rachel remembered how she'd clapped and laughed, sitting on a checkered blanket with a picnic spread out before her. Good boy, Milo, she called, and great throw, kiddo. Daniel's face had lit up with that gap-toothed smile that always melted her heart. He ran over and plopped down beside her, wrapping his small arms around her neck. This is the best day ever, Mom, he'd whispered in her ear. The memory faded, dissolving like mist in the harsh light of the clinic. Rachel blinked, surprised to find herself standing beside Chi-Chi's kennel, one hand resting lightly on the sleeping dog's head. Doctor. Morgan. Nina's soft voice broke through her thoughts. Are you okay? Rachel pulled her hand away quickly, straightening her lab coat. I'm fine, she said, her voice clipped. Just checking his vitals. Nina's kind eyes held concern. You've been standing there for almost 5 minutes. Have I? Rachel glanced at her watch, flustered. Well, we need to prep for another intake. Animal control called. They've got a stray cat with an injured paw coming in about 20 minutes. But it's almost the end of your shift, Nina pointed out gently. I can handle it if you want to go home and rest. Rachel shook her head. No, I'd rather stay busy. She moved toward the supply cabinet, effectively ending the conversation. Let's get ready. That night in her empty house, Rachel tossed and turned in her sleep. In her dreams, Daniel's face floated before her, sometimes laughing, sometimes calling for her, his small hand reaching out. Mom, help me! She woke with a gasp, her cheeks wet with tears. The digital clock on her nightstand read 2:17 a.m. Her heart pounded painfully in her chest. Without thinking, Rachel pulled on her robe and slippers. 20 minutes later, she was using her key to enter the darkened clinic. She told herself she was just checking on Chi-Chi's condition. A responsible vet would do the same. The treatment room was quiet except for the soft hum of equipment. Rachel approached Chi-Chi's kennel and found him awake, his amber eyes watching her intently. There was something in that gaze, a gentle understanding that made her breath catch. "Hey there," she whispered, opening the kennel door. "Couldn't sleep either, huh?" Chi-Chi's tail thumped weakly against the blanket, and Rachel felt something shift inside her chest, a tiny crack in the wall she'd built around her heart. The next morning, Rachel sat at her desk, attempting to focus on Chi-Chi's case report. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but her mind kept drifting back to those knowing eyes in the middle of the night. She shook her head and forced herself to type. Suddenly, a violent thrashing sound erupted from the recovery area. Rachel's head snapped up. "Doctor!" "Morgan!" Nina's panicked voice called out. Rachel rushed into the room to find Chi-Chi's body contorting unnaturally, his limbs rigid and jerking. Foam bubbled from his mouth as he seized violently on the blanket. "He was fine just a minute ago," Nina cried, her hands hovering helplessly. Rachel froze. The sight before her blurred with another memory. Daniel on the kitchen floor, his small body shaking uncontrollably, eyes rolled back. Her son's face superimposed over Chi-Chi's for a terrifying moment. "Doctor? Morgan?" Nina's voice seemed distant. "What should we do?" Rachel blinked hard, forcing herself back to the present. "Diazepam," she ordered, her doctor's instincts finally kicking in. 5 milligrams now." As Nina rushed to the medicine cabinet, Rachel carefully turned Chi-Chi onto his side, making sure his airway remained clear. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "It's okay, boy. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." They worked together, administering the medication and monitoring his vitals. The seizure gradually subsided, leaving Chi-Chi limp and exhausted, his breathing shallow but stable. "What caused this?" Nina asked, wiping her forehead with the back of her hand. "Could be trauma, infection, or poison from his previous environment," Rachel said, checking his pupils. "We need to run more tests." Throughout the night, Rachel refused to leave Chi-Chi's side. She sat on a stool beside his kennel, occasionally reaching in to stroke his fur when he whimpered in his sleep. Nina offered to take over, but Rachel politely declined. "I need to monitor him," she insisted, though they both knew it was more than professional obligation driving her. Morning light filtered through the blinds when Officer Eli Grant walked in. Finding Rachel in the same position, dark circles under her eyes. "You look like you've had quite a night," he said, handing her a cup of coffee. Rachel accepted it gratefully. "Chi-Chi had a seizure. He's stable now, but it was touch and go for a while." Eli nodded, his expression serious. "I might know why." He pulled out his notepad. "Got an anonymous tip last night. Someone reported seeing a dog matching Chi-Chi's description at an illegal fighting ring in Millfield, about 2 towns over." Rachel's hand tightened around the coffee cup. "Fighting ring?" The informant said this particular dog was a champion that suddenly disappeared after refusing to fight. The owner was furious, put out feelers to get him back. Rachel looked at Chi-Chi's sleeping form, his scarred body rising and falling with each breath. "He's not going back there," she said firmly. "Ever." The next few days brought subtle changes to the clinic. Rachel monitored Chi-Chi's every improvement with the precision of a scientist and the hidden hope of someone afraid to believe in recovery. "He took the food from my hand today," Nina reported, her face bright with excitement. "No growling, not even a flinch." Rachel nodded, keeping her expression neutral despite the warmth spreading through her chest. "His blood work is improving, too. The antibiotics are working." By the 4th day, Chi-Chi was standing on wobbly legs, taking tentative steps around his kennel. Rachel watched from the doorway as Nina gently stroked his head, the dog leaning slightly into her touch. "Look at that," Nina whispered. "He trusts me." Rachel's lips curved into the smallest smile. "He's a fighter," she said, then quickly added, "In the good way." That afternoon, a local farmer brought in a cat caught in barbed wire. The next morning, someone dropped off an injured rabbit found on the roadside. By week's end, 3 more strays had found their way to Rachel's clinic. Nina arranged kennels to accommodate the newcomers, her movements efficient, but her eyes questioning. "People are talking," she finally said, checking an IV drip on a dehydrated terrier. "Word's getting around that you're taking in strays now." Rachel focused on changing a bandage. "We've always treated strays when necessary." "Not like this," Nina persisted. "We could make it official, you know. Set up a proper rescue section. I could coordinate volunteers." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Rachel interrupted, though her tone lacked its usual sharpness. She paused, looking around at the filled kennels. "But I'll think about it." That evening, Officer Eli Grant stopped by, his usual easygoing demeanor replaced with something more guarded. "Any news on the fighting ring?" Rachel asked, leading him to her office. Eli sighed, removing his hat. "That's what I came to tell you. I've been told to focus on more pressing matters." Direct quote from the captain. "More pressing than animal abuse and illegal gambling?" "Apparently." Eli lowered his voice. "Something's not right, Rachel. When I mentioned the anonymous tip, my captain got real interested in who made the call." Rachel glanced toward the recovery area where Chi-Chi rested. "You think there's more to this?" "I think someone with influence doesn't want this investigated," Eli said. "And that dog in there might be the only witness to whatever they're hiding." Rachel felt a chill run through her. What had Chi-Chi seen? And who was afraid of what he might reveal? Later that day, Rachel pushed open the clinic door, arms full of supplies she'd picked up from the pharmacy. Her mind was still churning with Eli's words about someone powerful wanting to keep Chi-Chi's past hidden. She froze mid-step. There, in the recovery kennel, Chi-Chi sat upright on his haunches. His ears perked forward, and his eyes, clear and alert, followed her movement. It was the first time she'd seen him fully aware, fully present. "Well, look at you," Rachel whispered, setting down her bags. The German shepherd didn't wag his tail or make a sound, but his gaze remained steady on her face. The scars across his muzzle and chest stood out starkly against his fur, but there was something dignified in how he held himself. Rachel approached slowly, extending her hand. Chi-Chi sniffed it cautiously, then, so subtly she almost missed it, leaned his head a fraction of an inch toward her fingers. "You're getting stronger," she said, her voice catching unexpectedly. "Good boy." Nina appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. "Doctor, Morgan, can I show you something?" Rachel reluctantly pulled away from Chi-Chi. "What is it?" Nina held out the tablet, displaying a local community Facebook page. "Someone posted this last night. A rescue dog was found dead near the old mill." Rachel took the tablet, scanning the post. The image showed a pit bull mix clearly once injured and recovering, now lying lifeless in a ditch. The person who posted this says the dog had been adopted from a shelter 2 towns over last week. It had scars, just like... Nina glanced meaningfully at Chi-Chi. "Just like fighting dogs," Rachel finished, a knot forming in her stomach. "Has anyone reported this to animal control?" "That's the thing. The post was deleted an hour after it went up. I only saved it because I thought you'd want to see it." Rachel handed back the tablet, her mind racing. "This isn't a coincidence." The clinic door opened again and Eli stepped in, his face tight with concern. He nodded toward Nina, then gestured Rachel aside. "I've been officially warned off the chip investigation," he said in a low voice. "My captain called it a waste of department resources." Rachel frowned. "That's ridiculous." "It gets worse. When I mentioned the fighting ring again, he got real defensive, said I was chasing conspiracy theories. Eli leaned closer. Rachel, I think someone in the department is protecting these people. Rachel looked back at Chi-Chi, who was still watching them with those knowing eyes. For the first time in months, she felt something stirring inside her, a sense of purpose, of righteous anger. What do we do now? She asked. Eli stood by the window, watching Rachel tend to Chi-Chi. His mind drifted back to a memory he'd been trying to suppress since seeing the German Shepherd's scars. It had been almost exactly a year ago, a rainy Tuesday. The call came in from an anonymous tipster about strange noises at the old Miller property on the edge of town. Dogs barking, men shouting, cars coming and going at odd hours. Just check it out, his sergeant had said. Or probably nothing. Eli remembered the long driveway, the tall gates, the way the security cameras swiveled to follow his cruiser. A man in expensive boots and a hunting jacket had met him at the door. Officer, the man had greeted him with a politician's smile. What can I help you with? Eli had explained about the noise complaint, asked to look around. The man, Councilman Reeves's brother-in-law, he later learned, had been all cooperation, showing him the 3 purebred hunting dogs in clean kennels. But Eli had heard something else, a whimper from behind a locked shed. What's in there? He'd asked. Just equipment, the man had said, smile never wavering. Nothing interesting. When Eli pushed, the man made a call. 20 minutes later, Eli's captain showed up, pulled him aside. Insufficient evidence, he'd said firmly. We're leaving. The next day, the complaint disappeared from the system. These injuries are familiar, said Maria, the director of Animal Haven. She gently examined the photos of Chi-Chi on Rachel's phone. We've seen 3 dogs in the past year with similar scarring patterns. Rachel glanced around the peaceful sanctuary. Dogs of all sizes lounged in the sunshine, some playing in fenced yards, others napping under trees. The place radiated safety. Were they fighting dogs? Rachel asked. Maria nodded grimly. Almost certainly. The pattern of bite marks, the deliberate cuts to make them aggressive. It's textbook. She handed the phone back. Your Chi-Chi is lucky to be alive. He's not my Chi-Chi, Rachel said automatically, though something inside her protested the words. Well, he found you for a reason. Maria paused. We have space here, if you're concerned about keeping him at your clinic. Back at the clinic, Rachel watched Chi-Chi through the glass. He'd managed to stand up completely now, though his back leg still trembled with the effort. What do you think, boy? She whispered. Would you be safer at the sanctuary? As if he understood, Chi-Chi's head turned toward her, their eyes locked. In his gaze, Rachel saw something that made her throat tighten. Trust. Complete, unwavering trust. Nina appeared beside her. You're not really going to send him away, are you? Rachel didn't answer immediately. The sanctuary was secure, with staff around the clock. Her clinic was just a small building with basic security. If someone wanted to get to Chi-Chi. But as she watched, Chi-Chi limped toward the glass, pressing his nose against it, where her hand rested on the other side. I don't know, Rachel admitted, feeling the emotional tug-of-war inside her. I really don't know. Eli stood by the window, watching Rachel tend to Chi-Chi. His mind drifted back to a memory he'd been trying to suppress since seeing the German Shepherd's scars. It had been almost exactly a year ago, a rainy Tuesday. The call came in from an anonymous tipster about strange noises at the old Miller property on the edge of town. Dogs barking, men shouting, cars coming and going at odd hours. Just check it out, his sergeant had said. Probably nothing. Eli remembered the long driveway, the tall gates, the way the security cameras swiveled to follow his cruiser. A man in expensive boots and a hunting jacket had met him at the door. "Officer," the man had greeted him with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "What brings you out here today?" When Eli mentioned the complaint, the man had laughed. "Just training hunting dogs. Nothing illegal about that." But Eli had seen the blood on the man's sleeve, had heard the whimpers from somewhere behind the house, had noticed how quickly other men appeared, standing too close, watching too carefully. His sergeant later told him to drop it. "These are important people, Grant. We don't hassle them without rock-solid evidence." Now, looking at Chi-Chi's scars, Eli knew what he'd walked away from that day. The clock on Rachel's nightstand glowed 12:03 a.m. when the loud banging jolted her awake. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she sat up, disoriented. The banging came again. Someone at the clinic's back door. Rachel grabbed her phone and crept down the hallway. The banging had stopped. Through the small window in the door, she peered out into the darkness. Nothing moved in the empty parking lot. She was about to turn away when something caught her eye, a white square under the door handle. Rachel's fingers trembled as she cracked the door open just enough to snatch the paper. A note, the letters cut from magazines and pasted in a crooked line. "Stop asking questions. Next time, it won't be a warning." Rachel slammed the door shut and locked it, her breath coming in short gasps. She leaned against the wall, the paper crumpling in her fist. Instead of calling the police, she found herself walking to the recovery room where Chi-Chi slept. The German shepherd lifted his head as she entered, ears perked forward. He sensed her fear immediately and began to whimper, trying to stand despite his injuries. "Shh, it's okay," Rachel whispered, kneeling beside him. Her hand shook as she stroked his head. "We're in this together now." Chi-Chi settled, resting his chin on her knee. His warm brown eyes looked up at her with something Rachel hadn't seen directed at her in a long time: trust. She stayed there until morning light filtered through the blinds. When Rachel unlocked the clinic at 7, Eli was already waiting outside, hands in his pockets, shoulders hunched against the morning chill. "You look like you haven't slept," he said as she let him in. Without a word, Rachel handed him the crumpled note. Eli's face hardened as he read it, his jaw clenching. "This isn't a game, Rachel," he said, his voice low and urgent. "These people. This isn't just about a dog anymore. You're poking at something people would kill to keep hidden." Rachel glanced back at the room where Chi-Chi rested. "What do we do?" "Be careful," Eli said. "Very, very careful." Rachel moved through her clinic with practiced efficiency, checking inventory and updating patient files. But every few minutes her eyes drifted to Chi-Chi, who had taken to following her from room to room, his nails clicking softly on the tile floor. When she paused at the medicine cabinet, Chi-Chi sat patiently beside her, his amber eyes watching her movements. When she bent to examine a cat with an infected paw, he settled in the doorway, head on his paws but alert. Nina smiled as she watched them. "He's like your shadow now," she said, handing Rachel a fresh syringe. "He's just feeling better," Rachel replied, trying to sound clinical. But her hand lingered on Chi-Chi's head when she passed, and she'd started bringing extra treats in her pocket. Later that afternoon, as Rachel finished updating a patient chart, Nina leaned against the doorframe, her expression soft. "You know," she said, nodding toward Chi-Chi, who lay curled near Rachel's desk, "he thinks you're his person." Rachel looked up, startled. "What?" "His person," Nina repeated. "The one he belongs to. The one who belongs to him." Rachel turned to look at Chi-Chi, who raised his head at her attention, his tail thumping once against the floor. Something tightened in her chest. Fear, maybe, or something else she wasn't ready to name. The coffee shop was nearly empty when Rachel met Janet Lynn the next day. Janet was younger than Rachel had expected, maybe early 30s, with short-cropped hair and watchful eyes that scanned the room constantly. "I appreciate you meeting me," Rachel said, sliding into the booth. Janet nodded. "Eli said it was important." She wrapped her hands around her mug. "And that it was about the dogs." Rachel showed her photos of Chi-Chi's injuries. Janet's face darkened as she swiped through them. "I've seen these before," she said quietly. "Same pattern, same purpose." "What do you mean?" Janet glanced around before leaning closer. "I worked at County Animal Services for 3 years. Started noticing dogs coming in with these exact injuries. When I reported it, my supervisor told me to drop it." She paused. "Then my car windows got smashed. Then my apartment was broken into." "Who would do that?" Rachel asked. "Charles Gorman," Janet said, almost whispering the name. "He's on the Chamber of Commerce, donates to every charity in town. But there were whispers about properties he owns out by the county line, places where they breed fighting dogs." Rachel felt a chill. "And no one investigated?" Janet gave a bitter laugh. "Oh, they investigated. Found nothing. 2 weeks later, I was fired for documentation errors. A month after that, my landlord suddenly needed my apartment for a family member." Back at her apartment that night, Rachel sat at her kitchen table, laptop open, Chi-Chi sleeping at her feet. She'd spent hours researching Charles Gorman, his businesses, his properties, his connections. The man was everywhere in town, sponsoring Little League teams, cutting ribbons at charity events, smiling from newspaper photos with the mayor. But beneath the community leader image, Rachel found something else. Gorman owned 6 storage facilities through different shell companies, all clustered near the rural edge of the county, near where Chi-Chi had been found. Rachel zoomed in on a satellite image, her heart racing. One facility had what looked like kennels behind it. If she could prove Chi-Chi came from there. She glanced down at the sleeping dog. For the first time in years, she felt something stirring inside her, a sense of purpose, of righteous anger. "We're going to get them," she whispered to Chi-Chi. "I promise." Officer Eli Grant arrived at the clinic just after lunch, his face tight with concern. Rachel was ready for him. The desk in her office covered with printed photos, property records, and a large county map with red circles marking specific locations. "What's all this?" Eli asked, eyebrows raised as he took in the makeshift investigation board. Rachel pointed to the map. "Charles Gorman's properties, 6 storage facilities, all registered to different shell companies." She tapped a photo of a fenced compound. "This one has what looks like kennels in the back." Eli picked up a satellite image, his expression shifting from surprise to respect. "You've been busy." "I couldn't sleep," Rachel admitted. She glanced at Chi-Chi, who was curled up in the corner of her office. "Not after what Janet told me." Eli set the photo down and rubbed his face. "Rachel, I appreciate the initiative, but this is dangerous. Gorman has connections everywhere. If he's behind this..." "If," Rachel cut in. "Look at these." She pushed forward photos of Chi-Chi's injuries alongside similar wounds documented in cases Janet had shared. Same patterns, same purpose. Eli studied them, his jaw clenched. "I understand, but..." "I'm going to check out the property," Rachel said firmly. "Absolutely not," Eli shot back. "Then come with me." Her eyes were steady, determined. "Off duty. Just 2 people taking a drive." Eli stared at her for a long moment. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "Would you?" Rachel asked quietly. The storage facility looked abandoned at first glance, a cluster of metal buildings behind a chain-link fence with a rusty no trespassing sign. Eli parked his personal truck down the road, and they approached on foot through a line of trees. "We're just looking," Eli reminded her, his hand hovering near where his off-duty weapon was concealed. "No breaking in, no confrontations. They found a gap in the fence behind some overgrown bushes. The compound was eerily quiet as they made their way to a small shed set apart from the main buildings. "There," Rachel whispered, pointing to heavy padlocks on the door. Eli peered through a dirty window. "I can't see much, but—" He moved to another window with a broken corner. "Rachel, look." She stepped up, her breath catching. Inside was concrete flooring with dark, rusty stains. Metal chains hung from hooks on the wall. "That's blood," Rachel said, her voice barely audible. "And those chains—" Eli pulled out his phone and quickly took photos. "This is enough to get a warrant." A sound in the distance made them both freeze, tires on gravel. "Someone's coming," Eli hissed, pulling Rachel away from the window. They ducked behind a stack of empty crates as a black SUV with tinted windows rolled slowly into the compound. It stopped near the main building, engine idling. Through the gap between crates, Rachel could see the driver's window lower. Charles Gorman sat inside, his face hard and expressionless as he spoke into a phone. "I don't care how it's handled," his voice carried in the quiet air. "Make sure that dog disappears, permanently." Rachel felt her blood run cold. Beside her, Eli's hand gripped her arm, a silent warning to stay still. Gorman's eyes scanned the property as he continued his call. "And find out who's been asking questions. This ends now." The envelope arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Nina found it first, sliding it from the mail slot with casual disinterest until she felt its unusual weight. "Doctor, Morgan," she called, peering inside. Her eyes widened. "Rachel, you need to see this." Rachel emerged from the treatment room where Chi-Chi had been dozing. "What is it?" Nina pulled out a stack of crisp $100 bills. There's $10,000 in here." Her voice trembled with excitement. "No return address, just the clinic name." Rachel's face didn't mirror Nina's joy. She took the envelope carefully, as if it might bite. "No note?" "Nothing." Nina was practically bouncing. "Think of all the supplies we could get. The treatments for the strays. This is amazing." Rachel set the envelope on the counter, her fingers lingering on its edge. "It's suspicious, is what it is." "Suspicious?" Nina's smile faded. "Why would someone giving us money be suspicious?" Rachel thought of Gorman's voice at the storage facility, the threat in his words, the note on her door. "Because nobody gives away this kind of money for nothing," she said quietly. "This is hush money." Nina's excitement deflated completely. "Oh!" By afternoon, Rachel had made her decision. She counted out $3,000 and handed it to the security contractor. "I want cameras at every entrance," she instructed as he nodded. "Motion sensors, reinforced locks on all doors. How soon can you finish?" "2 days tops," the man replied, pocketing the cash. After he left, Rachel found Eli waiting in her office, his face grim as she told him about the money. "You think it's from Gorman?" he asked. Rachel nodded. "Who else? The timing is too perfect." Eli ran a hand through his hair. "It could be a trap, a test to see if you can be bought." "I know." Rachel gestured to the contractor's van outside. "That's why I'm using his money against him. The rest is going into a separate account. Evidence." Eli leaned forward. "Be careful, Rachel. Men like Gorman don't play games they can't win." "Neither do I," she said, her voice steady. "Not anymore." That evening, after Nina had gone home and the clinic had fallen quiet, Rachel sat on the floor beside Chi-Chi's bed. The German shepherd's wounds were healing, patches of fur beginning to grow back over the worst scars. "What did they do to you?" she whispered, her fingers gently tracing the air above a particularly deep scar on his flank. Chi-Chi's ears perked up at her voice. His amber eyes, once dull with pain, now watched her with quiet intelligence. He shifted, nudging his nose against her palm. Rachel felt something crack inside her, a wall she'd built after Daniel died, a barrier against feeling too much, caring too deeply. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against Chi-Chi's warm side. "I'm sorry," she whispered, not sure if she was apologizing to the dog or to herself. "I'm so sorry." Tears came then, silent and hot, soaking into Chi-Chi's fur. The dog didn't move away. Instead, he turned his head, resting his muzzle gently on her shoulder in an almost human gesture of comfort. Rachel wrapped her arms around him, careful of his healing wounds. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her grief and the strange, unexpected hope that had arrived with this broken creature who somehow understood her pain. Rachel sat at her desk, squinting at the yellowed newspaper clipping. The summer sun streamed through her office window, highlighting the dust particles that danced in the air. The article, dated June 15, 1965, showed a much younger Charles Gorman accepting a plaque from the mayor. His smile was broad, confident, nothing like the cold, calculating man she'd glimpsed in the black SUV. Local breeder Charles Gorman received Civic Award for Animal Breeding Excellence, she read aloud, her voice hollow with disbelief. Gorman's innovative techniques have revolutionized purebred dog training in the county. She set the clipping down, a sick feeling churning in her stomach. The man who now orchestrated dogfights had once been celebrated for his supposed love of animals. His entire empire was built on a foundation of lies. "How does someone go from this," she whispered to herself, tapping the photo, "to ordering the death of innocent animals?" The next day, Rachel drove to Janet Lynn's modest apartment on the edge of town. The former vet tech welcomed her with nervous eyes, constantly glancing toward the window as they spoke. "Everyone loved him back then," Janet explained, setting down 2 cups of tea. "Gorman was like royalty in this town. His kennels produced champion after champion." "When did things change?" Rachel asked. Janet's hands trembled slightly. "About 10 years ago. Rumors started. Dogs disappearing, strange noises at night from his properties. But people looked away. He employed half the town, sponsored every event." "Did you ever see anything concrete?" Janet hesitated, then stood and retrieved a folder from a locked drawer. "I shouldn't have kept these, but I knew someday someone would need to know." She spread out several photocopied documents, property listings, zoning permits. "Look here," Janet pointed to a list of addresses. "These are listed as training facilities and pet shelters. But I visited one once delivering medications. There were no pets being sheltered, just cages. And the sounds." She shuddered. "No animal should make sounds like that." Rachel carefully photographed each document with her phone. "Thank you, Janet. This might help more than you know." "Be careful," Janet warned. The last person who asked questions moved away with broken ribs. That evening, Rachel met Eli at a diner 2 towns over, where nobody would recognize them. She slid her phone across the table, showing him the photos of Janet's documents. "I cross-referenced these addresses," Eli said quietly, pushing a notepad toward her. "This one here, it's the same property where we found those chains." Rachel felt a chill despite the warm evening. "So we have a connection." "It's still circumstantial," Eli cautioned. "We need someone to talk, someone from inside his operation." "Or we need to catch him in the act," Rachel suggested. Eli nodded slowly. "I've been thinking the same thing. But it's dangerous, Rachel. These people don't play by any rules." Rachel thought of Chi-Chi's scars, of the dead rescue dog Nina had shown her, of all the animals who couldn't speak for themselves. Neither will we, she said firmly. Not anymore. For the first time since they'd begun working together, Eli smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Then let's build a case no one can ignore, he said, raising his coffee cup and a small toast. Rachel was sorting medical supplies when she heard it, distant barking from somewhere in the neighborhood. She glanced up, expecting nothing unusual, but froze when she saw Chi-Chi's reaction. The German shepherd's ears flattened against his head. His body trembled as he backed into the corner of the room, eyes wide with terror. A low whimper escaped his throat as he pressed himself against the wall. Chi-Chi? Rachel set down the supplies and approached slowly. What's wrong, boy? The barking continued, and Chi-Chi's panic intensified. He scrambled toward the back door, scratching frantically at the wood, desperate to escape. Rachel knelt beside him, careful not to touch him during his distress. You're safe here, she whispered. Nobody's going to hurt you. But Chi-Chi wasn't listening. His eyes weren't seeing the clinic. They were seeing somewhere else, somewhere that made him shake with fear. Rachel realized with a sinking heart that the sound of dogs barking had triggered a memory, perhaps of the fighting rings, where he'd been forced to battle. It's okay, she soothed, waiting patiently until his trembling subsided. That's not your life anymore. Later that afternoon, Nina called Rachel to the front desk. You need to see this, she said, pointing to the security monitor. Rachel leaned closer, studying the grainy footage. Across the street, a dark sedan had been parked for over 3 hours. Inside sat a figure, barely visible, but clearly watching the clinic. I noticed it yesterday, too, Nina said quietly. Same car, same spot. Rachel felt a chill run down her spine. Save this footage. I'm calling Eli. Within the hour, Officer Grant arrived in plain clothes, reviewing the video with a grim expression. I ran the plates, he said, keeping his voice low. It's registered to Westbrook Holdings, one of Gorman's shell companies. Nina's eyes widened. They're watching us? They're watching Rachel, Eli corrected. They know you're onto something. Rachel stared at the shadowy figure in the car. Let them watch, she said, her voice steady despite the fear fluttering in her chest. That night, after the clinic closed, Rachel sat at her computer. Chi-Chi lay at her feet, his warm presence giving her courage. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a long moment before she began typing. I am a veterinarian, she wrote. 3 weeks ago, a dog collapsed at my doorstep. His body was covered in fighting wounds. His chip was deliberately erased. His spirit was nearly broken. She continued, describing Chi-Chi's injuries in clinical detail, explaining the signs of organized dogfighting, outlining the pattern of abuse she'd uncovered. She included no names, no locations, just the truth. This isn't one dog's story, she concluded. It's happening in communities everywhere. These animals can't speak, so I will. She posted it anonymously on a popular pet lovers forum, then shared it to several animal welfare groups. By morning, the post had been shared thousands of times. Local news sites were picking it up. Comments flooded in from people reporting similar cases across the country. It's everywhere, Nina said, showing Rachel her phone during their lunch break. People are demanding investigations. Rachel watched Chi-Chi sleeping peacefully in the sunlight. This is just the beginning, she said quietly. The sunlight streamed through the windows of the small veterinary clinic, casting golden patterns across the examination table. 8-year-old Daniel Morgan stood on a step stool, his tongue poking out in concentration as he carefully wrapped a bandage around a beagle's injured paw. Gentle but firm, Dr. Rachel Morgan instructed, watching her son with pride shining in her eyes. That's it, honey. You're a natural. Daniel's face lit up with a smile that could melt the coldest heart. Like this, Mom? He asked, securing the bandage with a small clip. Perfect. Rachel ruffled his sandy brown hair. "You'll be a better vet than me someday." Daniel giggled, gently stroking the dog's head. "I want to help all the animals just like you do." Rachel's heart swelled with joy and purpose in those days. Having Daniel beside her at the clinic made every day special. He had a natural way with the animals. They sensed his kindness, his gentle spirit. She taught him everything she could, encouraging his curiosity and nurturing his compassion. "Animals can't tell us where it hurts," she explained as they worked. "So we have to be their voice." "I'll always listen to them," Daniel promised solemnly. Back in the present, Rachel was cleaning out an old drawer when her fingers brushed against a folded piece of paper. Her heart skipped a beat as she carefully opened it. A child's drawing. Colorful crayon lines forming the shape of their old dog Milo, with "Best Dog Ever" written in uneven letters across the top. Daniel's artwork. Her hands trembled as she stared at it. Rachel walked slowly to Chi-Chi's kennel, where the German Shepherd was resting comfortably on his bed. She carefully taped the drawing to the wall beside him. "He would have loved you," she said softly, her voice catching. Chi-Chi lifted his head, his intelligent eyes meeting hers. "You're both fighters." She reached through the bars, gently stroking Chi-Chi's head. For a moment, she allowed herself to feel the grief instead of pushing it away. It still hurt. It always would. But somehow, it felt different now. Softer around the edges. The clinic door chimed later that afternoon. Rachel looked up to see a small boy, no more than 7, cradling a tiny gray kitten wrapped in a towel. "Please help her," the boy said, his voice quavering. "I found her all alone." Something about his earnest eyes, the careful way he held the kitten, struck Rachel deeply. For a moment, she saw Daniel standing there instead. "What's your name?" she asked gently, kneeling to his level. "Tommy," he replied. "Is she going to be okay?" Rachel carefully examined the malnourished kitten. "She needs care, but I think she'll be just fine," she said, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had been absent for years. "Would you like to help me?" Tommy nodded eagerly. "Don't worry about the cost," Rachel added, seeing his concerned expression. "This one's on me, and you can come visit her any time while she's recovering." "Really?" Tommy's face brightened. "Really," Rachel confirmed, surprising herself with how right it felt. "I think she'd like that." Rachel woke with a start, her mind foggy from a restless night. Sunlight streamed through her office blinds where she'd fallen asleep in her chair. She rubbed her eyes and glanced at the clock. 7:15 a.m. "Chi-Chi, I brought you some—" The words died in her throat as she walked to the treatment area. The kennel door hung open. Empty. "Chi-Chi?" Her voice echoed through the silent clinic. "Chi-Chi!" Panic seized her chest as she rushed from room to room, calling his name. Nothing. The German Shepherd was gone. With trembling hands, Rachel pulled up the security footage on her computer. There, at 3:42 a.m., the back door opened. No forced entry. Someone had used a key. A shadowy figure slipped inside, headed straight for Chi-Chi's kennel. "No, no, no," Rachel whispered, watching in horror as the figure tried to drag Chi-Chi out. The dog fought back, breaking free and bolting through the door into the night. Rachel grabbed her phone and dialed Eli. "Someone took him," she choked out when he answered. "Or tried to. He got away." "I'll be there in 10, Eli said, his voice tight with concern. Rachel and Eli drove slowly through the neighborhood streets, scanning every yard, every bush. "He couldn't have gone far," Eli reassured her. "Not in his condition." But after 2 hours of searching, desperation clawed at Rachel's throat. What if Gorman's people had found him? What if he was already— "Stop the car!" Rachel suddenly shouted, spotting a flash of movement in an alley between two buildings. She was out of the vehicle before Eli fully stopped, running toward the narrow passage. "Chi-Chi! Chi-Chi!" A faint whimper answered her. There, wedged behind a dumpster, was Chi-Chi. His bandages were torn, fresh blood matted his fur, and his eyes were wide with terror. "Oh, Chi-Chi," Rachel whispered, dropping to her knees. "It's okay. It's me." The dog trembled violently, but didn't move away as she inched closer. When she gently touched his head, he leaned into her hand. "Someone tried to take him again," Rachel said as Eli approached. "Look at him. He's terrified." Back at the clinic, Rachel cleaned Chi-Chi's new wounds while Eli paced the room. "This wasn't just a warning," Rachel said, her voice steady despite her shaking hands. "They were trying to silence him permanently." Eli nodded grimly. Gorman must be getting nervous about the online story. "I'm filing an official report," Rachel said, surprising herself with her resolve. "Right now, with evidence of breaking and entering, attempted theft, and animal cruelty." "Rachel, you know what that means. Once it's official—" "I know, but I'm done hiding." She looked down at Chi-Chi, who hadn't left her side since they found him. "We both are." Eli placed a hand on her shoulder. "I'll take it straight to internal affairs. Bypass the local channels completely. It's time we found out who's protecting Gorman." Rachel nodded, her hand resting protectively on Chi-Chi's head. "Whatever happens next, we face it together." The clinic hummed with activity as two burly men installed reinforced locks on all the doors. Rachel watched them work, her hand absently stroking Chi-Chi's head. The German shepherd hadn't left her side since the attempted abduction 3 days ago. "That should do it, Doctor." "Morgan," said one of the men, testing the new back door. "Steel core, security glass, and a digital lock. Nobody's getting in without your permission now." Rachel nodded, handing him payment. "Thank you. It means a lot." After they left, Nina approached with a stack of envelopes. More mail came in. People are really touched by Chi-Chi's story. The online post about Chi-Chi had spread faster than Rachel could have imagined. What started as an anonymous story had been shared thousands of times overnight. Someone had connected it to her clinic, and now letters arrived daily. "Dear Doctor," "Morgan," Nina read from one, "your courage in standing up for this beautiful dog has inspired me to volunteer at our local shelter. Thank you for reminding us that one person can make a difference." Rachel felt a warmth spread through her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. Purpose. "There's an email you should see," Nina added, handing Rachel her tablet. "This woman says she knows Chi-Chi." Rachel's heart skipped as she read the message. "Dr. Morgan, my name is Allison Vega. I believe the German shepherd you rescued once belonged to my foster son, Miguel. Chi-Chi protected Miguel from his abusive father before we got custody. The dog disappeared during a custody dispute. I have pictures. Please contact me." Attached were photos of a smiling boy, about 8 years old, hugging a younger, healthier Chi-Chi. "It could be a trap," Rachel whispered, but something in the woman's words felt genuine. That evening, after careful consideration, Rachel arranged a video call with Allison Vega. The woman who appeared on screen had kind eyes and a gentle smile. "Thank you for calling, Doctor." "Morgan, how is he doing?" "He's recovering," Rachel said cautiously. "You said you have pictures." Allison nodded and held up several photos to her camera. "This is Miguel with Chi-Chi 2 years ago. Miguel called him his guardian angel." Rachel turned her laptop so Chi-Chi could see the screen. The dog had been dozing beside her chair, but immediately perked up at the sound of Allison's voice. When the image of the boy appeared, Chi-Chi's reaction was unmistakable. He whined softly, ears forward, tail wagging slightly. He rose and approached the screen, sniffing and pawing gently at the image of the boy. "He remembers," Allison whispered, tears in her eyes. Rachel felt her throat tighten. "Where is Miguel now?" "Safe with me. We've moved to a new state. Miguel still asks about Chi-Chi sometimes." Allison hesitated. "We'd like to see him, if possible." Rachel watched Chi-Chi, still transfixed by the image on screen. The thought of Chi-Chi leaving tore at her heart, but seeing his reaction to the boy's photo. "I don't know," Rachel said softly. "After everything he's been through, I'm not sure what would be best for him." Rachel took a deep breath, watching Chi-Chi's reaction to the screen. Something inside her shifted. "Allison, would you be willing to come to the clinic? I think Chi-Chi would benefit from seeing you in person." Allison's eyes widened. "Really? I could drive there tomorrow. It's about 3 hours away." "Tomorrow at noon," Rachel said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. The next day, Rachel paced nervously by the front desk. Nina had helped clean the waiting room, sensing this meeting was important. Chi-Chi sat alert, as if he somehow knew something significant was happening. When the door chimed, a slender woman with dark hair stepped inside. Her eyes immediately found Chi-Chi, and her hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God!" Allison whispered, tears welling instantly. "It's really him!" Chi-Chi's ears perked forward, his tail giving a tentative wag. He seemed to be processing, remembering. "Please sit down," Rachel said, gesturing to the small seating area. "I'd like to hear more about how you knew Chi-Chi." Allison settled into a chair, wiping tears away. "Leo was my foster son. Such a troubled little boy when he came to us. He'd been through 3 homes before ours. Wouldn't speak, wouldn't smile. Then one day, this skinny German shepherd showed up in our yard." She smiled through her tears. Leo and Chi-Chi. It was like they recognized something in each other. 2 souls who'd been hurt. Leo only smiled when that dog was around. Rachel listened, her heart aching. What happened? Leo's biological father fought for custody. During one of the transitions between homes, Chi-Chi disappeared. Leo was devastated. We searched for months. Allison's voice broke. "I never thought I'd see him again." As if understanding every word, Chi-Chi slowly rose from his spot near Rachel. With deliberate steps, he crossed the room and did something that made Rachel's breath catch. He gently laid his head in Allison's lap. Allison broke down completely, her hands trembling as she stroked his scarred head. "You remember me, don't you, sweet boy?" "You remember?" Rachel watched, her own eyes filling with tears. In that moment, she understood something profound. Chi-Chi wasn't just part of her healing journey. Before he'd found his way to her clinic that stormy night, he'd been someone else's light in the darkness. He'd helped a silent boy find his voice, just as he was now helping Rachel find hers again. The realization washed over Rachel like a wave. This dog, with all his scars and trauma, had been bringing healing wherever he went. In the days following Allison's visit, Chi-Chi began spending more time near the front of the clinic. Rachel noticed how he would position himself by the waiting room chairs, especially when children were present. His scarred body and gentle eyes seemed to draw people in rather than frighten them away. "He's like a little therapy dog now," Nina remarked one morning as Chi-Chi rested his head on the lap of a nervous 8-year-old waiting for his cat's checkup. The boy's anxious fidgeting had stopped completely. Rachel nodded, watching the scene with a warmth spreading through her chest. It's like he knows who needs him most. The clinic was busier than it had been in years. Rachel's viral post about Chi-Chi's journey had touched something in the community. People came with their pets, but they also came to see the brave German shepherd and the veterinarian who had saved him. "Dr. Morgan?" An elderly woman approached the desk. I just wanted to say thank you for what you're doing. My grandson showed me your story online. It gave me hope. These moments happen daily now, strangers sharing how Chi-Chi's story had moved them. Each time, Rachel felt another small piece of her heart thaw. One afternoon, Rachel opened her email to find an invitation from the Lakeside Animal Welfare Association. They wanted her to speak at their annual conference about Chi-Chi and the broader issues of animal abuse. Her finger hovered over the delete button. Public speaking? Putting herself out there? It felt impossible. But then she glanced at Chi-Chi, who was gently nuzzling a little girl's hand. The child giggled, the same bright sound Daniel used to make. "I'll do it," Rachel whispered to herself, clicking accept, before she could change her mind. Across town, Officer Eli Grant sat in his unmarked car, passing a thick manila envelope through the window. "Everything's in here," he told the woman in the passenger seat. "Bank transfers, payoffs to former employees, property records. Gorman's been buying silence for years." Melissa Chen, an investigative reporter for the Lakeside Chronicle, flipped through the documents. "This is explosive, officer. How did you get this?" Eli's face remained impassive. "Let's just say I have sources who've been waiting a long time for someone to listen." Melissa nodded. "This, combined with Dr. Morgan's story about Chi-Chi, we could finally bring him down." "Just be careful," Eli warned. "Gorman has friends in high places." As Melissa drove away, Eli thought about Rachel and Chi-Chi. A broken woman and a dying dog somehow becoming the catalyst that might finally bring justice to dozens of abused animals and expose a powerful man's cruelty. Sometimes, he thought, healing one's soul could start healing an entire community. The evening sky painted the park in shades of amber and gold as Rachel walked alongside Chi-Chi. His gait was still slightly uneven, but his strength had returned. Rachel found herself smiling as she watched him sniff excitedly at fallen leaves and squirrels darting up trees. They settled on a wooden bench beneath a maple tree, its leaves glowing like embers in the setting sun. Rachel breathed deeply, savoring the crisp autumn air. Chi-Chi sat alert beside her, his ears perking at every sound. "Look, Mommy, it's him!" a high-pitched voice called out. A small girl, no more than 6, came running toward them, her pink jacket flapping behind her. The girl's mother hurried after her. "Emma, don't bother." But Emma had already reached Chi-Chi. "You're the brave dog from the story, the one who escaped the bad people." She threw her little arms around Chi-Chi's neck. Rachel tensed, ready to intervene, but Chi-Chi simply lowered his head and allowed the embrace, his tail wagging gently. "I'm sorry," the mother said, catching up. "She saw your picture online. Your story really touched her." Rachel smiled, genuine warmth spreading through her chest. "It's okay. He seems to know who needs a hug." After they left, Rachel sat in peaceful silence, watching the sunset with Chi-Chi by her side. The next day, Rachel found Eli waiting for her outside the clinic. "How's the investigation going?" she asked as they walked inside. Eli's face was tired, but determined. "Moving forward, the reporter is being careful, gathering everything before publishing." They settled in Rachel's office, where Chi-Chi curled up in his new bed in the corner. "I had a dream about Daniel last night," Rachel said suddenly, her voice soft. Eli looked up, surprised by the mention of her son. "He was playing with Chi-Chi in our old backyard." Rachel's eyes grew distant. "It was different from the other dreams. I didn't wake up crying. It felt peaceful." "That's good, Rachel. I think he would be proud, of what we're doing." She glanced at Chi-Chi. "It's like I can feel Daniel pushing me forward somehow." Eli reached across and squeezed her hand gently. The moment was broken by Rachel's phone ringing. She checked the screen. "It's Allison." As she answered, her face quickly changed from curiosity to alarm. "Slow down, Allison. What happened?" Eli watched as Rachel's knuckles whitened around the phone. "When did you last see him?" Rachel asked, her voice tense. "And you're sure that's where he was headed?" When she hung up, her face was pale. "Leo's missing. Allison says he's been obsessed with finding out more about what happened to Chi-Chi. A friend said Leo was heading to one of Gorman's old warehouses yesterday afternoon. No one's seen him since." The next 24 hours unfolded in a blur of worry and determination. News of Leo's disappearance spread through the small town like wildfire. By morning, volunteer search parties had formed, combing the parks and neighborhoods with flashlights and hopeful hearts. Rachel paced her clinic, phone pressed to her ear as she coordinated with Allison. Chi-Chi watched her every move, his body tense, ears perked forward. He hadn't eaten since the news broke. "He knows something's wrong," Nina observed, setting down a bowl of untouched food. When Eli arrived, his face was grim. "I've got a list of Gorman's properties. 3 warehouses on the edge of town might be worth checking." Rachel grabbed her jacket. "Let's go. And Chi-Chi's coming with us." Eli raised an eyebrow. "Rachel, I don't think he's connected to this somehow. Look at him." They both turned to Chi-Chi, who was already standing at the door, whining softly. The first 2 warehouses yielded nothing but dust and empty rooms. As they approached the third, Chi-Chi began pulling hard on his leash, his nose working frantically. "He's onto something," Rachel whispered. Suddenly, Chi-Chi veered off the main path, dragging Rachel toward an overgrown trail barely visible between tall weeds. Eli followed, hand hovering near his concealed weapon. The trail led to a rusty side door of the warehouse. Chi-Chi scratched at it frantically, a low whine building in his throat. "Stay behind me," Eli warned, slowly pushing the door open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of damp concrete. Chi-Chi bolted forward, disappearing into the shadows before Rachel could tighten her grip on the leash. "Chi-Chi," she called in a harsh whisper, following the sound of his nails clicking on concrete. They found him in a back room, pawing at a large metal cage. Inside, curled up on a thin blanket, was Leo, pale, dirty, but alive. "Leo!" Rachel rushed forward as Eli worked to unlock the cage. The boy looked up, his eyes wide with fear, until they landed on Chi-Chi. "You found me," he whispered, reaching through the bars to touch the dog's nose. Once free, Leo threw his arms around Chi-Chi's neck, burying his face in the dog's fur. Tears streamed down his dirt-smudged cheeks. "I knew you'd come. I knew you'd remember me." Eli circled the room, taking pictures with his phone. Dogfighting equipment, training tools, blood samples. He pointed to a desk. "And paperwork with Gorman's signature. This is it, Rachel. This is everything we need." Rachel pulled Leo close. "We're getting you out of here, sweetheart. Your foster mom is worried sick." As they gathered to leave, the unmistakable sweep of headlights flashed through the grimy windows. Car doors slammed outside. "Someone's here," Eli whispered, drawing his gun. "Rachel, take Leo and Chi-Chi to the office we passed. Lock the door and don't come out until I call for you." Rachel nodded, her heart pounding as she ushered Leo and Chi-Chi toward the small office. She could hear footsteps approaching the warehouse entrance. From the safety of the office, Rachel held Leo close, her hand covering his mouth to muffle his frightened breathing. Through a crack in the door, she could see into the main warehouse space. Chi-Chi stood rigid beside them, a low growl rumbling in his chest. Heavy footsteps echoed through the warehouse. A tall figure in an expensive coat walked into view, his silver hair catching the dim light. Charles Gorman. Rachel recognized him from the newspaper photos. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone and began recording. "Disgusting mess," Gorman muttered, kicking at an empty cage. "I told you to clean this place thoroughly." He spoke to someone just out of view. "We can't afford another mistake after that German Shepherd escaped. Do you know how many dogs I've had to clean up because they weren't profitable? The ones that wouldn't fight? The weak ones." Rachel's stomach turned as Gorman continued, his voice cold and calculating. "Move the operation to the Riverside facility and make sure those other dogs disappear permanently. No evidence, no problem." Suddenly, Eli stepped out from behind a stack of crates, his gun raised. "Charles Gorman, you're under arrest for animal cruelty, illegal gambling, and child endangerment." Gorman's face drained of color. "Officer, there's been a misunderstanding. I'm just a businessman checking my property." "Save it," Eli said, pulling out handcuffs. "We have everything on record." Rachel stepped out of the office with Leo and Chi-Chi, her phone still recording. "It's over, Gorman." Gorman's eyes narrowed when he saw her. "Dr. Morgan, I should have known." His expression shifted to a practiced smile. "Perhaps we can discuss this like reasonable adults. I can make it worth your while. $50,000 to forget what you think you saw here." "Your time's up," Rachel said firmly. "No amount of money can erase what you've done." As Eli secured the handcuffs, Chi-Chi suddenly barked sharply and ran toward a metal door at the back of the warehouse. He scratched frantically at it, whining and pawing. "What's in there?" Eli demanded. Gorman remained silent, his jaw clenched. Rachel rushed to the door and found it padlocked. Eli shot the lock off, and the door swung open to reveal a horrifying sight: stacked crates containing at least a dozen dogs. Emaciated, wounded, and terrified, they cowered in their tiny prisons. "Oh my God," Rachel whispered, tears streaming down her face. She immediately knelt by the first crate, speaking softly to the trembling pit bull inside. In the distance, sirens wailed as Eli's backup approached. Rachel and Leo began opening crates while Eli kept Gorman secured. "It's okay," Rachel whispered to each frightened animal. "You're safe now. It's over." Days turned into weeks as news of Charles Gorman's arrest spread across the region. The local newspaper ran front-page stories detailing the underground dogfighting ring and the brave veterinarian who helped bring it down. Gorman was officially charged with multiple counts of animal cruelty, illegal gambling, and child endangerment. His once pristine reputation crumbled as former associates distanced themselves and his business empire began to collapse. Rachel became something of a local hero, though she remained humble about her role. She focused instead on rebuilding her clinic, which was now busier than ever. People brought their pets from towns away, wanting to support the veterinarian with a big heart. "I never wanted fame," she told Eli one afternoon, as they watched volunteers renovate the clinic's back room into a rehabilitation space. "I just wanted justice for Chi-Chi." "Well, you got both," Eli said with a smile. "And those dogs needed someone like you." The rescued dogs from Gorman's warehouse were distributed among various animal shelters in the region. Rachel kept two of the most fragile ones at her clinic, a blind terrier mix and a severely malnourished boxer. Both were terrified of humans and other dogs, except for one. Chi-Chi had become their guide, their protector. He would lie between them during thunderstorms when they trembled with fear. He showed them how to trust the gentle hands that fed them. It was as if he understood their pain completely. "He's teaching them what you taught him," Nina observed one day as they watched Chi-Chi lead the blind terrier around the yard. On a crisp autumn morning, Rachel drove to the cemetery on the edge of town. She walked slowly through the rows of headstones until she reached a small one with a carved teddy bear. Daniel Morgan, beloved son. Rachel knelt and placed a single yellow flower on the grave. Chi-Chi sat quietly beside her. "We did it, Danny," she whispered, her voice breaking slightly. A tear slid down her cheek, not from pain this time, but peace. I think you would have loved to see this. For the first time in years, she could remember her son's smile without drowning in grief. All of a sudden, Rachel's quiet morning was shattered by a sharp knock at the clinic door. A stern-faced woman in a dark suit handed her an envelope. "Legal notice for Dr. Rachel Morgan," she said flatly. Rachel's hands trembled as she opened it. The words blurred before her eyes. Charles Gorman was suing her for theft of property, specifically Chi-Chi. According to the documents, Gorman claimed ownership through registration records linked to the scrubbed microchip. Somehow, he had manipulated evidence to suggest Rachel had stolen the dog from his legitimate breeding facility. "This can't be happening," Rachel whispered, clutching the papers. "He's out on bail." "Some legal loophole," Eli explained when she called him, his voice tight with anger. "His lawyers found a technicality. The judge granted bail yesterday." The next morning, 2 police officers, neither of them Eli, arrived at the clinic. "Dr. Morgan, we need you to come with us for questioning regarding the theft allegations." Nina watched in horror as Rachel was escorted out. "This is ridiculous. You know what that man did." "Ma'am, please step back," one officer warned. By afternoon, yellow tape blocked the clinic entrance. "Temporarily closed pending investigation," read the notice on the door. Nina tried to protest to the authorities, insisting on the truth about Chi-Chi's condition when he arrived. "Miss Patel, continuing these statements could result in charges of interfering with an investigation," a lawyer representing Gorman warned her. "I suggest you consider your future carefully." Nina retreated, tears streaming down her face. Meanwhile, across town, 10-year-old Benji sat at his computer, troubled by what he'd heard about Dr. Morgan. 2 months earlier, he had been filming birds outside the clinic for a school project when he'd captured something through the window, Chi-Chi having a seizure, and Dr. Morgan working desperately to save him. "Mom, I have to help Dr. Morgan," Benji insisted, showing her the footage. "She saved that dog. She didn't steal him." With his mother's permission, Benji uploaded the video to social media. The truth about Dr. Morgan and Chi-Chi. The footage clearly showed Chi-Chi's terrible condition, Rachel's skilled medical response, and most damning to Gorman's case, Rachel whispering to the traumatized dog, "You're safe now." The video spread like wildfire. Justice for Dr. Morgan began trending locally, then nationally. People recognized the severity of Chi-Chi's injuries and the loving care Rachel provided. The tide was turning back in Rachel's favor. The winter morning air bit at Rachel's skin as she stepped out of the police station. She blinked in surprise at the crowd gathered across the street, dozens of people holding handmade signs. "Justice for Dr. Morgan," "Heroes have 4 paws," and "Reopen the clinic." Benji pushed through the crowd, his mother following behind. "Dr. Morgan, did you see my video? Did it help?" Rachel knelt down, tears welling in her eyes. "It helped more than you could ever know, Benji. You're my hero." News vans lined the street as reporters thrust microphones toward her. "Dr. Morgan, how does it feel to be exonerated?" Before she could answer, Eli approached with a grim smile. "You'll be pleased to know Gorman's bail has been revoked. The judge reviewed Benji's video and several new testimonies that came forward after it went viral. He's back in custody as of this morning." At the clinic, Rachel stopped short at the entrance. The yellow tape was gone, replaced by hundreds of colorful notes taped to the door and windows. She read a few. "Thank you for saving the dogs. My puppy loves you. You're our hero." When she pushed open the door, Nina looked up from the reception desk, her face lighting up. "Rachel," she cried, rushing forward to embrace her. "I kept everything running. Well, as much as I could without you." A familiar bark echoed from the back room. Chi-Chi appeared, his tail wagging furiously. He bounded toward Rachel, skidding to a stop at her feet. With gentle dignity, he lowered his head into her outstretched hands. "I'm home," Rachel whispered, her fingers running through his soft fur. "We're both home." The grand conference hall buzzed with anticipation as Rachel stepped onto the stage. Hundreds of animal rights advocates, veterinarians, and lawmakers filled the seats at the State Animal Rights Summit. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the microphone. 3 years ago, she began, her voice steady despite her nerves, "I lost my son Daniel. I shut down. I stopped living." She paused, looking out at the sea of attentive faces. "Then one stormy night, a broken dog found his way to my clinic door." Rachel shared Chi-Chi's journey, the fighting rings, the abuse, the slow path to trust. Photos of his recovery appeared on the screen behind her. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the audience. "What I didn't expect," Rachel continued, her voice catching, "was that while I was healing him, he was healing me. I learned that healing doesn't happen in isolation. It happens through connection." The audience rose in a standing ovation as Rachel finished. Tears streamed down faces throughout the hall. Back at the clinic, Chi-Chi sat patiently beside a trembling 8-year-old boy who'd witnessed a car accident. The child's fingers clutched Chi-Chi's fur as the German Shepherd leaned gently against him. "You're my hero," the boy whispered, burying his face in Chi-Chi's neck. Nina watched from the doorway, smiling at Rachel. "He's a natural," she said softly. Rachel nodded. "He knows what it's like to need someone." Later that afternoon, Rachel carefully hung a newly framed photograph in the lobby. On the left was an old picture of Daniel laughing with their family dog Milo. On the right, a recent photo showed Chi-Chi surrounded by smiling children from the therapy program. Beneath the photos, a brass plaque gleamed in the afternoon light. "Healing comes in many forms. Sometimes it has 4 legs." Rachel touched the frame gently, feeling Daniel's presence in this moment of purpose. The clinic had transformed from a place of lonely work to a sanctuary of second chances, for animals, for children, and for her. The next morning, sunshine streamed through the clinic windows as the front door chimed. Rachel looked up from her paperwork to see Allison Vega walking in with Leo beside her. The boy looked transformed from the frightened child they'd rescued months ago. His cheeks were fuller, his eyes brighter, and he carried himself with newfound confidence. "Dr. Morgan," Leo called out, waving excitedly. "I brought my report card to show you." Allison smiled proudly. "Straight A's this semester. The school counselor says she's never seen such a remarkable turnaround." Leo clutched a small backpack. "I want to help on weekends," he announced. "I already asked my teachers about a community service project, and they said helping at an animal clinic would be perfect." Rachel knelt to his level. "We could always use an extra pair of hands around here." Just then, Chi-Chi trotted into the lobby. When he spotted Leo, he froze for a heartbeat, then bounded forward with a soft whine of recognition. Leo dropped to his knees, arms wide open. "Chi-Chi," he cried as the German Shepherd gently nuzzled against him. The boy buried his face in the dog's neck, whispering words only Chi-Chi could hear. Rachel stepped back, watching the reunion from across the room. Something warm and bittersweet filled her chest as she observed their silent communication. Chi-Chi had healed her broken heart, but he clearly meant just as much to this boy. Later, while Leo helped Nina organize supplies, Allison approached Rachel privately. "I've been thinking," Allison said hesitantly. "Leo's made such progress. I wonder if having Chi-Chi with us might help him even more. We could adopt him officially." Rachel felt a momentary tightness in her throat, but it passed quickly. She smiled gently. "I think he's right where he's meant to be. But you're always welcome here," she said. "Anytime Leo needs to see him, And now with him volunteering. She touched Allison's arm. Some bonds don't need ownership papers to be real. Allison's eyes filled with grateful tears. You're a special person, Doctor. Morgan. Rachel watched Leo laughing as Chi-Chi licked his face. We all are. We just sometimes need someone to remind us. The morning sky blushed pink and gold as Rachel and Chi-Chi made their way down the snow-dusted path in the park. Their footprints, one set human, one set paw, marked the pristine white blanket behind them. Rachel's breath formed small clouds in the crisp air as they approached the wooden bench where she and Chi-Chi had sat months ago, watching golden leaves fall. Now the bench bore a small brass plaque that gleamed in the early light. Daniel Morgan, forever loved, forever with us. Rachel brushed away a dusting of snow and sat down, Chi-Chi settling beside her. The German shepherd's warmth pressed against her leg as she gazed at the rising sun. I think you'd be proud, Danny, she whispered. No tears came this time, just a gentle peace that wrapped around her like a familiar blanket. As the sun climbed higher, children began appearing on the park paths with their pets, dogs on leashes, cats in carriers, even a rabbit in a small portable pen. They waved excitedly when they spotted Rachel and Chi-Chi. Dr. Morgan, we're ready for clinic day, called a little girl with pigtails holding the leash of an elderly beagle. Rachel smiled and stood, brushing snow from her coat. The small parade of families followed her and Chi-Chi back toward the clinic, chatting happily. A mother with tired but hopeful eyes fell into step beside Rachel. You know, she said quietly, you've created something more than a clinic. You've created a place where people believe again. Inside, the once quiet clinic buzzed with activity. Volunteers in bright blue vests moved between examination rooms. Nina directed traffic at the front desk, her confidence grown. Leo stood at a table, carefully showing younger children how to make simple toys for shelter animals. Rachel moved from room to room, checking charts, guiding volunteers, examining pets. Her hands were sure and gentle, her voice calm and reassuring. From his spot near the center of the lobby, Chi-Chi watched it all with attentive eyes, a silent guardian of the healing that happened within these walls. At that moment, the clinic door opened, letting in a gust of cold air. A woman in her 30s stepped inside, gently guiding a small girl who couldn't have been more than 8 years old. The child's shoulders were hunched, her eyes downcast, and her hand gripped her foster mother's with white knuckles. Hi there, Rachel said softly, approaching them. I'm Dr. Morgan. What brings you in today? The foster mother smiled apologetically. This is Lily. We're not here for a pet. Her therapist actually suggested animal therapy for her anxiety, but she lowered her voice. She's terrified of animals. Rachel knelt down to Lily's eye level, keeping a comfortable distance. That's okay, Lily. Being scared is nothing to be ashamed of. Lily peeked up briefly, then looked back down. Rachel glanced at Chi-Chi, who had already noticed the newcomers. With a subtle hand signal she taught him, she invited him over. The German shepherd approached slowly, then sat a few feet away from Lily. His scarred body relaxed, his eyes gentle. This is Chi-Chi, Rachel explained. He was very scared when he first came here too. Lily looked up cautiously. He was very scared. But he's safe now, and so are you. Over the next 15 minutes, Rachel talked softly about Chi-Chi's story, simplifying it for the child. Lily gradually moved closer to the patient dog, her foster mother watching with hopeful eyes. Would you like to touch his fur? Rachel asked eventually. Just one finger if you want. He's very soft. Lily hesitated, then extended one trembling finger. It hovered above Chi-Chi's back for a long moment before gently coming to rest on his fur. Suddenly, the girl's face crumpled. Tears spilled down her cheeks, but she didn't pull away. Instead, her small hands spread out on Chi-Chi's back. Rachel knelt beside her. "It's okay. He understands pain too." "He's not scary," Lily whispered through tears. "He's just sad inside, like me." The foster mother wiped her own eyes as Lily leaned against Chi-Chi, who remained perfectly still, his eyes soft and knowing. In that moment, Rachel saw herself reflected in this broken child, herself from months ago, walled off and afraid to feel. Now here she was, whole again, helping others find their way back. She looked at Chi-Chi and whispered, "We're doing it, aren't we?" Chi-Chi lifted his head and rested it gently on her knee, his eyes meeting hers with quiet understanding. Two wounded souls, now healers. That evening, after the clinic had closed and the last volunteer had gone home, Rachel sat at her desk with a leather-bound journal open before her. The soft glow of her desk lamp cast warm shadows across the pages as her pen moved steadily across the paper. "Chi-Chi came to me dying, and I thought I saved him," she wrote, pausing to glance at the German shepherd dozing peacefully in the corner. "But he was the one who saved me." She closed the journal with a gentle thud and placed it beside the framed photograph of Daniel. Her son's smile beamed back at her, no longer bringing that sharp stab of pain, but a warm glow of remembrance. The next morning, fresh snow blanketed the ground outside the clinic. Chi-Chi bounded through it, his dark fur dotted with white flakes as children from the neighborhood squealed with delight. They tossed snowballs that he caught midair, his tail wagging furiously. Rachel stood in the doorway, arms folded against the cold, watching the scene unfold. Her breath formed small clouds in the winter air as she smiled. Not the forced smile she'd worn for so long, but one that reached her eyes and warmed her heart. As the children played, Rachel's thoughts drifted to how far they'd all come. The clinic was thriving. Chi-Chi was healthy. And her heart, her broken heart, had found its rhythm again. Sometimes, she thought to herself as she watched, the broken ones arrive not to be healed, but to help us remember how to live again. Snow continued to fall gently around them. Chi-Chi paused in his play, lifting his scarred face to the sky, his tail wagging as snowflakes melted on his nose. If you enjoyed the story of Dr. Rachel and Chi-Chi, I handpicked this next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.